all settled. And so welcome to the 10th annual Seed Exchange. And I just am here to introduce my new friend, Suzanne Rougé. Rougé, sorry.
That's all right, it's a hard one.
Hummingbird Horizons, and she's going to talk about hemp and what we're going to do with it and how to do the things with it. And I'm really excited about this. So,
Thank you.
we get over it. And then I'll be back in 30 minutes to wind it up so we can get the next speaker.
Perfect,
Yes.
that sounds good. So, my name is Suzanne Rougé, and I have been a hemp supporter since 1978. I took first in state with a speech, a persuasive speech about why we needed to do this to save the planet. I believe that hemp is the flower of life, and I think we've been waiting for a long time to free this plant. So, what I want to do first is ask a few questions, and don't feel shy about giving me an honest answer. Because part of the reason I'm speaking today is that we're working with the Crestone Energy Fair to try and put on a symposium. And right now, I'm just gathering lots of information about what's going to serve the public best when we do that. And then letting you guys know all the different wonderful attributes of hemp. So my first question is, how many of you are aware of hemp and the different uses of hemp? Raise your hand. Okay. How many of you are already involved in the industry itself? Okay, so we got a few people. Okay, great. How many of you are frustrated with the way that hemp is rolling out in the valley? And I would love to be able to visit with anybody after this 30-minute talk about what that is, because that's what I'm doing right now, is finding out who's involved, what are they doing, what are the challenges, what are the successes, and how do we collaborate? Because the biggest problem I see right now is that if we don't work together, this thing is going to have massive problems that roll out. So I don't want to say we want to control it, because I'm not a control freak. But we do want to have some foresight about what we're doing and what the long-term effects of that will be, especially if we're looking at medicinal, and if we're looking at food, and we're looking at fiber. There's three different, very distinctly different plants that we're talking about growing. The problem is that they don't play nice together. And that's the problem that we're having already. I am a teacher. That's all I am as an educator. So I'm trying to find out, how do we come up with solutions so that the whole industry moves forward? Some of you may have already seen my poster, but I created this poster. This is one of my girls. So I did a painting of her. And then I put all the different uses in nine different categories and samples of what we can do with this plant. It's amazing, everything that can be done with this plant, okay? So we need to see how we can roll this out so that we can create some small cottage industries in the valley that are focused on biomass. So when I say biomass, how many of you can answer the question of what is it? Few people. Okay, great. So I'm all about biomass. I love every aspect of this plant, and I think this plant is really a powerful ally. First of all, climate change. I don't care whether humans are creating it or whether Mother Earth is shaking her back. That's what the prophecies say. But we have a responsibility to address that. So when you're growing hemp, you're sequestering carbon from the environment. When you build a house out of it, you get to do that for 60 years, which is way cool. That house is cleaning up the air. And what happens is, the hemp, like if you're composting, you have to have straw or grass because it heats it up. Well, the hemp heats up the lime. and then the lime eats the hemp. So in a matter of about 60 years, depending on the size of the house or building, that building will become a monolith, one structure, and it becomes limestone. So you have a rock, you're living in a rock, and the lime ate all the boards and it ate all of the screws. So it's earthquake proof, because if the earth shifts, there's no joints. It's one solid building. It's fireproof, it's waterproof, it's pest proof, it's mold and mildew proof. Now it takes 10 years for that house to be able to say it's all those things. But I have a hemp block that I often bring to talks, and I'll take a torch and I'll talk for 15 minutes holding that torch on that brick. It doesn't burn. So especially people building in the mountains, because first you have fire and then you have floods. This house will survive either. And they say about 300 years. There's a bridge, right? Everybody knows water erodes everything, right? It was built in the 5th century in France. It's a bridge, and it's still being used. Hemp becomes a rock, okay? And then it's impenetrable. Does that make sense? That's a little bit about building. I've done all different kinds of things because I'm really engaged with this plant. So I knocked on doors for 64. I went to the legislative meetings just to be a body that shows people care about this issue. Then I went to the very first meeting that was held in Denver after 64 passed. And that's what I want to try and recreate here in the Valley. Because basically there were about 400 people that showed up, which is a large crowd. And they had everybody with a microphone introduce themselves and say, I'm an educator, I'm a grower, I'm a distiller, I'm interested in seed genetics, whatever. And then after everybody had introduced themselves, they said, okay, self-select. Find the people that you want to talk to. And your name tag had what you were interested in. And then they did some groups. So we could see how we could collaborate together. I need seeds, you've got ground. You've got ground, I need this kind of seed for my ground. If we have these kinds of conversations, we're going to go a lot further. I had one time, I used to be a teacher, elementary school teacher, and we had to cross the Prue River. And I've got a bunch of 6th graders. Now, as a teacher, you think safety first, safety first, safety first. And I've been a 1st grade teacher, so you really have to think that. And I'm thinking, this is crazy. So we start to cross, and what's happening? Everybody's scared, everybody is nervous, everybody is not sure of their footing, they've never done this before. And then they said, everybody hold hands. And once everybody held hands, everybody walked across that river, no fear, no problems at all. That's what I want to create here in the Valley, where we can look at how can we create industries so that we can do more with our biomass. Right now, biomass all over the valley, if you drive around, you see it, it's in great big piles, right? Seen as trash. So it's not trash. Every single aspect of this plant, they call it tatanka oyate in the Lakota way. Everything is used. This is the lesson of abundance. So the roots can be basically power washed, and then you put them in a Vitamixer, and then you have capsules, and you fill your capsules. It has no THC, it has no CBD, but it is one of the best anti-inflammatories. So if you want to add some pepper and some turmeric, or maybe some cayenne in that capsule, you've got a really wonderful product to sell, okay? The redding on the outside of the plant, that's the stuff that's fibrous, okay? So the plants, pretty much all of the hemp that's being grown here in the valley is medicinal hemp. It's basically cannabis for medicine with different layers or levels of THC. Okay? So that's a different plant than when you have a plant that you are growing for food. If you're growing the plant for food, Now you want to have seeds. You press those seeds and you can make powders out of them. You can make seed cakes out of the little shells that are left over. That's one of the best food for young animals. And the seed cakes could be very popular. The FDA is having to do all this testing. How many of you know the history of hemp and why it was taken from us? Nobody. One person.
Actually, it was a racist issue because of the Mexicans and the people in the black people in the jazz community, and this way to suppress them.
It is. That the word marijuana, Mary and Juan were the two most popular Mexican names. Don't use that word. It's cannabis. Okay? Hemp has lower THC, but they're all cannabis. It's like if you come to the garden, you might see a pepper plant that looks like another pepper plant. So what we're calling marijuana is like having a chili pepper compared to a sweet pepper. Okay, same plant, but doing different things. If you want to be able to build a house out of your hemp, you have, or fibers for clothing, you have to grow the kind that's 18 feet high. It grows like bamboo. You have to plant it very close to each other because those roots interlock, and when the wind blows, they hold each other up. So we have to first of all know what we're working with. And the racist piece of this was huge. The other piece I always like to point out is reefer madness. There's a few people here who are old enough to remember that, okay? That's social programming. And it was so complete that I always have conversations with people who are angry with me when I open my mouth. Because it's the devil weed, and it's terrible, and it has no value. You know when it got that status of no value? It was in the late 70s when the first empirical, scientific, peer-reviewed research was released that it cured cancer. And within 2 years, it was a Schedule I, no medical value. Guess who has the patent on it? U.S. government. So it has no value, but we want to own it. Crazy, okay? So part of this is social revolution in taking this back. In 1936, Popular Mechanics did a magazine article, and in that they called it the $1 million crop. That was a big number in 1936. The next year, they taxed it so heavily that no farmer would grow it. And you know why? Because petroleum and paper in trees and pharmaceuticals were coming forward. And back in the day, you guys, how many of you have ever played Monopoly? Shame on you! Social programming. Let's make this a fun game. Let's get everybody to believe that a monopoly is how we move forward. And that's exactly what the men, because it wasn't women at that time, were doing, right? So the Rockefellers, for example, were very involved in that. So what they did was they lobbied it away from us. Pay attention to what's happening in the legislature, because what they do is these great big 500-page things. And on page 36, and on page 72, and on page 400, they put in all these little stipulations that nobody is paying attention to, and that's how they enslave us. This is our liberation. So for me, this is social revolution as well. It was taken from us by people who did not want all the versatility that it can provide. Okay? So they're the ones who are fighting now. Like when we first passed 64, and I'm so excited, and finally the world is going to change, and it's going to change before I die, and this is so cool, and I'll give everything I've got to it, right? Well, you can plant seeds, but you can't buy them, and you can't import them, and you can't sell them. That was the first hurdle, okay? So we've had all these different hurdles since then. Recently, there was the FDA that put regulations on it. And those regulations are ridiculous. They are to shoot it in the foot because Big Pharma does not want this coming out. It threatens so much of their income. The other thing is that it can't be patented. This is Mother Earth. This is our mother wrapping her arms around us, and they're not going to be able to control that. And they want to be able to control everything. So another aspect of this is really looking at, you can grow this medicine in your backyard. You don't have to grow an acre of it. How much are you going to use, right? And if you wanted to build a house, take a guess as to how many acres it would cost or require to build a 1,500 square foot house. Anybody brave enough to guess at that?
3.
3 acres? An acre? Eighth of an acre. It's actually 2.5 hectares, which is a little less than 3 acres. It's over 2 acres. Not very much space, right? One of my dreams is to buy 5 acres and grow my house on it. Show other people with 5 acres I can be totally self-sufficient. I can take care of my basic needs without having to leave my 5 acres, including building my house. So,
What would be the cost of building a 1,500 square foot house?
So the one that we built is 1,800 square feet, and it was about $50,000 to build it. Okay? Now we did it all from scratch, and we were up on the top of a mountain that had been burned. So we cut the trees down and we rolled them down the hill. And then I got to take this really cool tool and do this for like 3 weeks to get all of the bark off of it. And because they were charred, they were already cured. So then we had to have somebody come out and test them to make sure that they could be used in building. So it would cost a lot more if you're not sourcing all of the stuff yourself, okay? I also volunteered. I've never taken a penny for anything I've done. This is my love for my mother. This is my devotion to my mother. It's not about money for me. So I helped Tanya do some growing this summer. I don't know, 100 hours maybe?
More than 100 hours.
Probably more than 100 hours. I helped build that house. I did that as a volunteer, okay? Because for me, this is a whole different thing than about money. And that's one of the places that we're running into trouble. The place in center. You've got a bunch of suits from New Jersey, and they're seeing the numbers that are growing on the shareholders. And that's all they see. I'm going to make a bunch of money, so I'll put $20 million and build this thing, and then totally crash it, because they don't know what they're doing.
They have
And
pharma in their name.
Not only do they not know what they're doing, they don't know our valley. I started coming to this valley in 1993, and my heart has lived here ever since. I moved here 3 years ago, and it has been a rocky road trying to figure out how to survive down here. But I'm also devoted to this valley. So if we join hands, we create a hedge to the outside world. If we already are meeting our needs, we don't need to be dependent on some big corporation someplace else. So the thing I'm most passionate about right now, and I'm passionate about different things every day of the week, pretty much because I'm a Gemini, is I want to do hemp toilet paper here in the valley. I work at Valley View Hot Springs. We go through 50,000 rolls of toilet paper every year. And then there's 28 retreat centers in Creston. They all need toilet paper too. So we could do small cottage industries, set one up in Creston, set one up in Moffat, set one up in Saguache, and have them be cottage industries that are providing what we need. It is antibacterial, so when you wipe your butt, it's actually clean. It breaks down in your septic tank faster than any other paper products that are out there. And the leach field in your septic tank, it cleans it up. Hemp has been used at Rocky Flats, and it was used at Chernobyl. And the uptake of uranium was highest of all of the plant mitigations that they tried to use. Hemp comes out number one. It pulls uranium out of the soil, and then guess what? You can turn that into batteries. Lithium is not such a great thing. So we all say solar is great, but look at solar waste. There's a problem with that. And that solar waste happens every 20 years. Those batteries or less have to be replaced, right? The solar panels have to be broken down. So there's a thing called a supercapacitor. Does anyone know what that is? Can you explain it?
From what I understand, it's able to basically to generate electricity without any loss.
Yes, that's right. And it charges instantly and it discharges instantly. So all of those electric cars that they also took away from us, you guys, they bought that patent 45 years before we ever saw an electric car. Henry Ford built a car out of hemp, and it was fueled with hemp ethanol. It's hemp and sisal. 14 years after the first car. 14 years. He said, we can do this better. But Detroit did not really want to see that happen. And look what happened to Detroit. It's a mess. You know, the steel. You also think about jaws of life, pulling people out of cars, you know. There's a picture of Henry Ford. He's like 6 foot tall. He's got a sledgehammer, and he is wailing on the top of that car, and the sledgehammer's just bouncing off. It doesn't crumple. Think of all the lives that would have been saved if we hadn't chosen steel. We could have grown our cars. Right now, BMW, Mercedes, all the big names are using hemp. Because on the inside, all that plastic on the inside, it's not going to break. So you've protected the people much more when you don't have a car collapsing in on them. So this is supposed to be a question and answer. Who has a question for me? I think I can answer any question you might throw at me.
Growing hemp, how are we going to be able to do that and keep the people that are growing medicinal marijuana so that they don't cross-pollinate?
Thank you. I kind of thought that question was going to come up. And there's actually, we have a really wonderful resource right here, Karen Kirshner. She wrote a wonderful article on that. There are a lot of things we need to do to mitigate it because there's a lot of outdoor grows here. So as far as a greenhouse, no problem. You have a hemp room, you have hemp filters, you take a shower in the hemp room, you put on a little orange suit or blue or green or teal or whatever color you like, and then you go in that room and you're not going to have a problem with pollen solved. But that's only for people who have enough money to be able to build these massive greenhouses. So how does the local farmer do it? Okay. Now we're talking small plots here. You could extend this to larger plots of land. Anybody got an idea about what you can do? It's a brilliant idea. You plant sunflowers, and you plant them very closely all along your borders. Your sunflowers are going to grow taller than your medicinal plants. They grow to 6 foot tall. They have to have about 4 feet in between them because they grow like this, right? So you plant your sunflowers like you would the hemp that's the tall hemp, because when the wind blows, you want those roots to be interlocked. How many of you ever touched a sunflower? It's sticky, right? So if the plant is higher, when the wind blows, you created a wall. And what happens with that sunflower when it grows? It's about that big around if you've got the right kind, and it starts to droop. When it droops, now it's also stopping the wind from pulling that pollen out. It's also creating a hedge. Like when you build a barbed wire fence, that's one thing, right? But if you put those ones that make it look like it's a prison, where they're at an angle, now you've got more protection. Same thing with those sunflowers. They create more protection. So let's say I don't want to change the genetics of my cannabis for THC. I also don't want my cannabis for hemp for CBD or CBG or CBA or all the other constituents. 460 complex chemicals in this one plant. It's consciousness in this plant. So if I have this hedge, I'm also holding my pollen in, if there is any. So if I'm growing for medicinal, whether this is hemp or whether this is cannabis for THC, I don't want to be high, because if it's over this ridiculously low number, Mother Nature made hemp 3 to 4, 5, 8% was where it was considered what we would call pot or weed or ganja. Okay, 8% was the cutting off point there. From 8 to 18%, that's what Mother Nature did. Okay, so at 18%, you have to have at least 18% before you're going to kill cancer. It's not a bad thing. But the Cannabis Cup, which is a competition, bigger, better, faster, more, has raised that number to 36% THC. How many of you are aware of the endocannabinoid system? Good. So the endocannabinoid system is the motherboard for your body. And you create CBDs in your own brain, okay? So what happens is, if it's too high in the THC level, it throws the endocannabinoid system out. So really, we should be aiming for 18, I'll even go to 21% if I had terminal cancer. But you go in any dispensary now, and I do believe that the young people are evolving to be able to do this. My children can smoke really high levels of THC, and I do the same thing, and I'm like, somebody help me stand up, please. Because we weren't built for that, but we are adapting. But one of the reasons it was considered a devil weed, and I actually have 3 people in my family, young men, can have real troubles with this. It can happen to women. It's more often that it happens in men when they are going through puberty. Okay, I started smoking pot in the 7th grade. So I know I went all the way through puberty doing this, but I smoked very little, and it wasn't very high THC. So when the brain is developing, you can't have high THC without having problems. How many of you know some young person who does have problems? Schizophrenic, or whatever label they want to put on it. That's because when their mind was developing, they smoked too much or they smoked too high of a content. Okay? So this is a medicine. Would you take your neighbor's insulin? Would you take your mother's blood pressure medication? No. We have to match the right medication with the right situation. The other thing that's really sad is that when they made it a Schedule 1, they also made it so that you could not do research in the United States on this plant. They didn't want anybody to know it was going to cure cancer, or that it was going to help with fibromyalgia, or that it was going to make kids who have ADD or autism better. They didn't want you to know that. And so they froze any college that tried to do any research on this. Their federal funding was gone for the entire college. Now, fortunately, in Israel and in Spain, if you want to learn about the research of the endocannabinoid system, especially Israel, just look that up, do a Google search, then you'll see. So we have to put tons of money into developing research, not only for the FDA, but to find out what is this plant and how do we use it best. There was another question back here.
When do you see the CBD market going up?
Yeah, what's happened is a bottleneck, right? Because everybody saw dollar bill signs, and we didn't have the infrastructure built out yet. That's why biomass is so important. I want every farmer to have insurance. I want every farmer to have free banking. And I also want them to know they have market. So let's say my THC content is 3.8, okay? There's ways you can mitigate that. There's ways that you can still get that to pass, okay? So, I lost my thought again. What was your question?
When you saw the CBD
So the bottleneck that happened there is also the FDA is making these regulations that are choking off the business. So we say, yes, you can grow hemp, but you can grow it anywhere and it's gonna be wonderful. And then the FDA created all of this fear in the markets for people to invest in it. That's all gonna clear. And I would say this whole thing is a 10-year process from now. Now they said that we'd be where we are now back in 2012. And we're exactly where they said we were gonna be. It would bottom back. And what's happened often is that you've got your material, but if the numbers are not really great, then you gotta wait in line to distill it. So you gotta wait your turn. If you're focused on biomass, you have an automatic in the fall, you cut down your plant and you've got a market to send it to. Now that gives you a little bit of money when you need it so that you can wait until you can get it distilled.
Where are these processing centers for the fiber that you're talking about for biomass?
So right now, decortication is the biggest issue. So we have to have more horizontal chippers and we have to have more decortication. So what we have to do is convince those people who are wanting to invest. And if you all have relatives, ask them to look at their 401k. Most people just say, it goes up a little bit, it goes down a little bit. I don't pay very much attention because that's my retirement nest egg. But they're paying for war, and they're paying for pharmaceuticals, and they're paying for oil, and they think they're innocent. You're not innocent. If you're destroying the planet, you're destroying the planet. So what we have to do is find those investors. As soon as we find those investors, all of that other stuff is going to open up very quickly, and then we won't have that bottleneck. We had way too many growers who thought they were going to make $1 million on this $1 million crop, which is actually billion and going to trillion, right? And they didn't know what they were doing. People planted all kinds of cultivars, all kinds of seeds, and they didn't even understand how that genetics was going to interface. So again, education is a huge piece of this. If you want to invest, I'm going to take off my jacket so you can see my shirt. If you want to invest, here's the place that I would do it. Research, because everything has to pass through the FDA. So if you want to make money right now, invest in cannabis research. There's a lot going on in Canada. The next thing is these supercapacitor batteries. They've already been invented. They're 300 times stronger than lithium. And we all know lithium isn't good for the environment. So you can, and all it takes is for 2 days, you cook it at 350 degrees, and then you incinerate it. Then you have a stackable carbon. How simple is that? You can put this hemp into 3D. You could build a 3D house with it, or anything else that's the composites. So those are places, because technology is not going to change. It's going to continue to advance, okay? I personally think that wiping people's butts is a really good investment because everybody needs toilet paper. I don't think we're going back to the Sears catalog anytime soon. And it's a far better product. So again, if you want that bottleneck to open up, we need to educate people about take your money out of that 401 that's destroying the planet and put it into the infrastructures of biomass. Everybody's going to make tons of money. You think the people who get in early on these supercapacitors, that's like Amazon, or that's like Microsoft, or that's like Apple was. But we have to find those people first. It will happen.
But you need to decord all of it before you use the fiber.
Pardon?
Mostly you need to decore everything before it is used.
Yes. But one of the things they used to do was they would leave it in the field all winter long. And it would mitigate the soil, and it would strengthen the soil that it was in. And then the redding comes off naturally. Now this was also, and we did a lot of hand labor, which is not so fun. But you just take that hemp stalk and you beat it on cement, and all the redding comes off. Then you put it through your diagonal or horizontal chipper, and now you have what you need for the basics. Tanya and I were talking about, you can, out of this, the CBD hemp, you can turn the CBD hemp easily into paper. So make your cardboard boxes, the redding, you can turn that into tissue paper. So now I have my oil and I put it in a nice little bottle and then I put it in a cardboard box and I put my packaging and it's all hemp. So again, if I'm just trying to make money on the distillate, I'm gonna be limited. If I look at what I can do with my biomass, now I have lots of options. Within 5 years, those options are gonna be rolling out. And I think, you know, I'm pretty passionate about this. I think in 3 years, we're gonna have toilet paper in this valley. And I think we're gonna have it in Crestone and in Moffat and in Saguache, if I have anything to do with it.
We'll sell you Richard Slims if you
Yay, yay, we're gonna
want.
need that. And again, that's another place that's a value plus product, right? Because if I want to make the biomass toilet paper, I'll come out there. I'll hire Tanya with her truck to be my garbage lady to come and pick up that and bring it to me where I'm going to be able to decorticate it or turn it into whatever. The best piece of that or whatever is the 3D. That's really pretty easy to make. So again, do we have people using it for 3D printers? Not really, not yet. Legos is going all hemp. Will we have it? Sure, they're a great example. If they do it successfully, other people are gonna say, I could do that too. So again, it takes leadership, but mostly what I think here in the Valley is that we need to be really careful about how we collaborate together, no matter whether you're on the medicinal side or on the fiber side, that we have to figure this out so that we don't harm each other. And we have to create collaboration in that way. So how do we save the planet? I'm not gonna save the planet with some big plan. I'm gonna do it by talking to you, by sitting down and saying, okay, I'm here in good faith. How do we figure this out? You know what? We can. I'm absolutely certain that we can. And something as simple as sunflowers, that might be the first place to start. Looks like I'm up, right? 7 more minutes. Okay, questions? Yes.
I have a question about the hemp building materials. Do you know, can they be used for underground structures, like, you know,
Good question, and no, unfortunately. Mother Earth wants to bring everything back to the earth. She wants to compost everything. So what happens when you go underground is it biodegrades really quickly. If you mix it with cement, it's not as green. You know, cement is a bad process, it ruins the environment, but you could do that. One of the things I want to do is build a wapiti, which is an underground, and then put in the hemp as insulation. But what I'm going to do first is put cinder blocks. Now I've created a barrier to Mother Earth, and now that hemp will catch that sunshine all day long and radiate it back out to my plants. So you can use it underground, but you have to have a barrier between the earth.
So it makes a heat mass. It makes a good storage.
Yes, it's a great heat mass, and a home that's made that's 12 inches thick has an R factor of at least 25. They stay at 60 degrees. So if your house is 60 degrees in the summer or 60 degrees in the winter, it's not hard to cool it or to warm it. You're already halfway there. And personally, I live in a little tiny house that gets down to 0, and I would think 60 would be fine. You know, I'm in the 50s, 30s, you know, I've learned to live with that. And again, that's a part of the fear that people have, right? Your body becomes resilient. I survived 2 days at 14 degrees below 0 with no insulation. I was inside a building, but it didn't have any insulation. And I tell you, I have not been cold since. That was a great outcome because it's all relative, but the body wants to adapt, and we're incredibly resilient.
So when you use the hemp blocks or whatever to build a wall, like in the dream house you're talking about, would you then kind of raise them off the ground so they don't get? Put a
foundation. You could put in a foundation, but what we do is we added. When I built a couple of houses, we added quickcrete to just the 18 inches, which is considered a snow line. I started to explain this earlier. I'll do this real quick. So you've framed out a house and you've put your 2 boards on either side. You've put PVC pipe through it so that you're going to have it hold its shape. 15 minutes later, you can take that off. And the next day, it's cured. I had 9 young men on the top of the dome within, we're building it and they're standing on it. It's very, very durable that way. And then you just move that shuttering. So when I teach people how to do it, you need a team of 12 people. That's best, not more. It's hard to get more people. But that way everybody can rest and everybody can take turns. You have 2 people mixing it. You have 2 people hauling it. You have 2 people putting it into the building. You have 2 people who are plugging, because after you pull those bolts out, you have holes, right? So you have people who take hemp and then they have a little dowel rod and they just push it in, and now it's self-healing. We did stucco on the outside of the building, and everybody told me, Suzanne, you didn't fail, because it was cracking, and I'm kind of a perfectionist. No, you didn't fail, that's stucco. Stucco takes 3 years. You're going to be patching it for 3 years when you do stucco, because of the way that the cold and the heat make it expand and contract. So that made me feel a little better. I didn't fail. We used a lime mix for the plaster that was from Rome. I thought that was kind of cool too. That we're reviving all of this stuff, So it does take, you have to wait 2 weeks before you plaster it, because that inside has to thoroughly dry. And then it takes another week before you can put the stucco on it.
So we're saying that you built the entire, it was an 1,800 foot.
1,800 square foot home.
In a couple of days?
No, that was a year.
Oh.
That was a year. And it took a whole summer to do the geodesic hemp dome, but that's because I was taking volunteers. So what I would do is every time we had a hemp bill, I'd teach everybody how to do it. And then I show everybody how to do it right. Because, right, as a teacher, kids are trying to do things and it takes some experimentation. If I would have had 12 people from the get-go who knew what they were doing and could do all of those jobs and just rotate it out, that's why you want a few extra people, because they're going to the bathroom or they're taking a break, because it's physical labor. I also tell people it's Mother Earth, because I always have to tell the gentleman, please pat this like a baby's behind. Because if you pound on it, you separate the lime from the herd, and now it's not going to cure properly. So just pat it in place. It's really cool.
So you're just using lime and decorded fiber and water?
The cord, so yes, and there's 2 different kinds of lime. This is one of the bad parts of it. One of them comes from France, so it's got a big footprint. But if you're building a house, you don't want to build it without that, because it has a higher content of silicate. The cool thing is there's a guy named Doc. He sells a hemp ice cream. I don't know if you know him. He's an awesome guy. He kind of looks like Jerry Garcia. I love that man. In Fort Collins, they had the beet district, right? And one of the byproducts of beet was lime. So he's trying to figure out how to create something like that here in Colorado that has the same properties of what is naturally found in France. But that place in France it starts with a P. Anyway, it's the only place in the world that has this type of lime. So you have to combine those 2. Then you use sand for certain parts of it. Okay, so sand is another piece. You're going to use that for your plaster. You're going to use that when you're doing your stucco, but mostly the plaster. You can also use it instead of concrete, but it's more vulnerable because it's just sand.
So you actually made like molds with plywood and then you stuff it with
That's how we did it. And we had, we were mixing batches, and then 2 guys would have a tarp. They'd pour the thing out on the tarp. 2 guys would pick it up, bring it over, and then dump it in. And then the rest of us would tamp it down. They also have a machine called a canoblaster. If I had $150,000 just to spare, it's like when they blow in insulation. So they have these frames that are made out of plastic, and they're like puzzle pieces. They hook together, right? So then you just stand there. I guess you start at the bottom. Build up. And it'll be the exact thickness that you need, as long as when you stand here, you can see that it's filled in that cavity. And again, 15 minutes later, I can take off that puzzle piece and move down. So you actually are always, like when you have your people who are shuttering is what that's called. So you have people who are packing, and then you have a space that's been shuttered, and then you have people who are building the next shuttering. So they're always one ahead of you. And it's smooth. If you have a well-coordinated team, you could build a house in a month and a half to 2 months with people working, full days.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
And thank you for showing up. If you have any other questions or you would like an educational poster of your own, I'm a teacher, so this is my visual aid. So I have the t-shirts, which are made out of hemp and cotton, and I have the posters, I have postcards, and I have magnets for your refrigerator. Help me educate people. That's the first step.
Lisa has
Thanks.
one thing to say.
Yes, please stop by the booth where we have the Energy Fair and the Hemp Symposium and get on this newsletter or the... Do we want to release the date? Do we feel good?
Well, we're looking at April 25th, if we can pull it off. And that's where we have the conversation only with the people who are already in the game. I want to have the conversation with people who are interested in the game, but we have to get that collaboration started so that we can look at where are our problems right now. There's a lot of problems in this valley, including the fact that a lot of people set up shop and then abandon it. And now my home is looking at this trashy space. I mean, that's a problem. So if we're going to have people feel positive, we need to solve some of those problems.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.